I know that there is a collective of people out there that are experiencing this outgrowing of family dynamics and outgrowing of things that have been in your life for probably the whole duration of your life. And one of the hardest things about outgrowing family dynamics and friends and things that have been in your life for a very long time is the fact that you have to set boundaries that are uncomfortable, and you have to check the values that you've gained as you've gone along this journey. A lot of the times when you take inventory of where you're at in that moment, you find that the things that you've accumulated on your development journey have changed you. And because of that, there is a discord between what was and what is. And when we experience that, we start to feel that discomfort because we now belong to a new world that we've created for ourselves. It's a world that's emerging, a new self that's emerging. But there's also, let's say, family, relatives that haven't gone on this journey, and it's completely fine because that's their choice. But because of that, there's a lack of change and a very sameness every time that you visit or you talk or you engage. And that feeling of discomfort, that feeling that you don't relate anymore is real. And it is painful. And that's what we want to talk about today. That's what I want to talk about today is that real in life pain that we experience when we no longer resonate with where we come from and what we can really do about that. Because burning bridges isn't really something that's healthy. So, what do we do when a part of us still longs for a connection in a relationship, but a part of us knows that it just can't meet us where we're at and we have no place to land in our old family dynamics, in that same home we grew up in, and with those same people that we used to feel at home with? It's a real in life thing that there's a collective of people that are experiencing this. And a lot of us, because we've been bred to believe that relatives, family, blood is long term and it's for life. And what do we do when we experience this stuff other than stick around, tolerate, compromise, shrink ourselves every time that we're around it? And when we do that for so long, that actually takes so much more energy than to actually just be our authentic self. And being our authentic self fully means that we're in that in every aspect of our lives. And there isn't an aspect of our lives where we go to where we have to change or we have to morph into somebody else in order to fit into that environment a little better. It's not a healthy way to live. And when we zoom out, we see how often we actually make ourselves do this. We see how often we engage in same olds just for the sake of keeping the same routines or not being the different one or not being the one that rattles the water. And when it comes to that, when you go back into your own space and you realize that that really depleted your energy, and you find that solitude for some reason feels better now, there's something inside of you that's calling you, that's trying to get your attention. A lot of the times we ignore it because it's uncomfortable. That part of us asks us to ask ourselves questions that are really hard to answer because the answers themselves reveal something that we have to do something about. And in all reality, change is scary. And even though our comfort zone isn't really productive, it's still predictable. So when we ask ourselves these real questions, we're forced to see the answers. And if we don't do anything about the answers, then that's self sabotage or we're going against ourselves knowingly. And that creates a whole other discord. So, that discomfort, when you start to ask yourself the right questions, or even that discomfort that you start to feel as you start to notice that there's a discord, there's a contrast between what was and what is and what's emerging. You start to slow down and see, where exactly does my old life not match to where I am at now and what I want to create more of? And those answers will help you create the boundaries that you need. Now, once you create those boundaries, I want to talk about the aftermath of whatever that boundary is, because there are, depending on your dynamic, times where you're going to have to put some relationships aside. And that is something that you probably never thought you'd have to do. And depending on your dynamics too, there are some relationships that you're going to have to end, because you know deep down inside that this relationship is tearing you down. It is holding you back. It's keeping you in the same role that you don't want to be anymore. And for as long as you have this person who's not willing to change, you have to play that role with them. And as you stop playing that role with them, dynamics get uncomfortable and weird and awkward, and you don't really know what to talk about anymore, and you don't know what to do, and you start to feel uncomfortable. These are your, the inside of you, your authentic self calling you, asking you to take inventory of what it is that you're entertaining now, what it is that you're so used to having in your life that you haven't zoomed out and asked yourself, what role am I playing in this relationship, in this dynamic, in this space in my life that no longer matches where I want to go and who I have become? And I think that that's the most important part, is who you've become because of all of the work that you've done, and not discrediting what you've changed into, because we start to doubt ourselves when we've changed too much, and then we see everybody else getting along with each other and everybody else is still okay, and you start to notice too many things that are unhealthy, that are old, that are enabling, and you just can't be around it anymore. And that's the real truth and the pain of having awareness when the people around you don't have it. And that's the hard decisions that you have to make, whether certain relationships that have been in your life for a long time are worth the peace and the consistency and the authenticity that you're working so hard to have in your life. Whatever your dynamic is, whether it's having to set really hard boundaries and saying, hey, this is when I'm available, this is what I value, these are the things that I really don't like to talk about, and if we can work out something between us where we don't talk about this and that. Like, if, for example, like, you don't like to talk about politics, but somebody in your family that you love, that's all they talk about, and it just depletes you and you just don't enjoy it, for example, and you're able to communicate to that person, I don't like it, let's find other things to talk about, then dynamics can pivot if other people are willing, if the other person in the relationship is willing to be open, to listen, to not get offended, and for that change to have longevity. Because a lot of the times people will tell you that they will change, and when you zoom out again, you see that it's a cycle. I'll change, they change for a little bit, and then it goes back to the same dynamic. So you have to be careful with that as well. So regardless of your dynamic, whether you've chosen to put hard boundaries, or if you've chosen to make the really hard and painful decision to walk away from relationships, whether it even be your own parents, your own siblings, friendships that you've had your whole life, if you've chosen to close the door on those relationships, first of all, I want to acknowledge that that is not an easy decision. And it's not a decision that you often make because you hate someone or because they're a bad person. It's because there's just no place for you to land anymore. And if you're being honest with yourself, there's no place for the other person to land with you anymore. There's just too much contrast. I want to acknowledge that that is a painful and hard decision, and that it's not just a momentary thing that you decide and just don't think about anymore, or that you just become neutral about immediately. It's hard. And you almost have to make that decision every day not to reopen that door when certain times of the year occur, and you miss them. You long for that old dynamic, that old feeling, that the old potential of what could have been. There are important things to do when you go past that decision, and not be in a space where you constantly doubt yourself. I don't want you to make that decision and then not live your life. It's important that you don't feel guilt, that you really solidify why you did this and why it's the healthiest thing for you, even though it hurts. And in that time and space where you've either gone into a little bit of solitude, or you've just stepped away from a cycle that was keeping you in a loop, and now you have space to create something new, or even just to be still with yourself and to figure out what's going on and ask yourself the right questions. Often it's not what's wrong with me, it's what's hurting me. What made me believe this? Why do I attract this? Look at cycles in your life that are repetitive and figure out the core of them. If you've eliminated noise and pain out of your life, use this space to really feel what your own peace looks like and feels like to you, and honor that peace, and don't abandon yourself. And when that feeling comes about of, did I make the right decision? Guilt, what if I hurt them? I just want you to know that that's all valid. And it doesn't make you a bad person, and it doesn't make them a bad person. It means that you've chosen to be authentic to yourself, and for however long it is to walk away from where you've come from. And that is a painful and hard decision that not a lot of people can make. But the people that do make that decision, that use that time productively and appropriately to figure out who they are, to emerge as their real selves, because they're no longer people pleasing, they're no longer shrinking, they're welcoming their power back, they're coming home to themselves. And that is something that I cannot emphasize for each and every single one of us, whether you walk away from family dynamics, whether your family dynamics are healthy. Coming home to yourself is something we all need to do, because we're all shaped from other people. And we don't know oftentimes the unconscious parts of ourselves that are so programmed. And it's important for each and every single one of us to always take inventory of ourselves, of our values, of our hobbies, of where we're at, what we want to create. Because living life mindlessly will create even more random chaos. It would perceive random than living life on purpose, than to understand why I attract the things I attract, where my beliefs are coming from, how my mind is shaped. These are all really important questions that we have to ask ourselves, especially when we feel that void of something is missing. And I have the career, and I have the marriage, and I have the friends, and I have everything, but something still feels missing, is a feeling that we all share. Most of us share, if we're being honest with ourselves. And sometimes, for some people, and there is a collective of people out there that notice that that comes from where they come from, where they still play old roles, where they need to walk away from things that they've had in their lives for a really long time. And I can't say enough how brave that decision is, and how much you have to make that decision with love. Because if you do it with animosity and hate and or pain and fights and fallouts, I think that that adds a layer of intensity and pain to an already hard decision. You can't control other people's reactions, and I acknowledge that completely. But you can always check with yourself, make sure that your intentions are very clear to you, and that every word that comes out of your mouth is in line with that intention. And sometimes when emotions get high, we say things we don't mean. And so that's why it's really important to be present and to build that presence and mindfulness inside yourself. And sometimes that entails isolation, that entails a little bit of solitude so you can figure out who you are. And solitude doesn't mean that you don't talk to any human or you don't have any relationships. It just means that you take extra time than you ever have in your life to spend time with you, to do things for you alone, without distractions, without your phone, without friends, without going out, without getting lost in TV shows or books or any other external stimulation. I cannot emphasize enough how important it is to use that time that you have walked away to fill your cup, to be who you really want to be, and give yourself permission to do things that are good for you, that fill you up. I always say that the most important relationship in your life is the relationship with yourself, and not in a selfish way. If your cup is full, you have the capacity and tolerance so much more than if you're depleted and if you've abandoned yourself. There will come a point in your life or in anyone's life when they abandon themselves enough to please others, to believe in other people's beliefs, that they'll get to a point where it's just too much. And you really ask yourself, who am I? And what do I stand for? What makes me happy other than conditional things? It's important to ask these questions and not fill our life with noise and distractions. When we know deep inside something's gnawing at us, to pay attention. If you have outgrown old dynamics, whether it be family or relationship dynamics, and you're sitting in that space, whether you're about to walk away, you're asking yourself whether to walk away, zoom out and see, have I exhausted my efforts in communicating my needs, in communicating what my values are, what my boundaries are, what my needs are, what I like and don't like? Have I exhausted my efforts in communicating that enough to understand that nothing's going to change, that everyone is on their own journey and we're on different timelines, different paths? Because walking away is a difficult decision and you don't want to live with regret. But ask yourself, if you've already walked away and you're struggling, it's okay to honor yourself. It is okay to feel that discomfort and walk away anyways, and to see what's on the other side, to lay down that boundary if you choose to stay, and let the chips fall where they may. Let people show you themselves and believe them when they do it. And if you've had enough cycles of back and forth and back and forth, ask yourself, how much more are you willing to do and take and put up with this if it really won't change? Again, I want to acknowledge how difficult this is, how painful it is, and how courageous it is to make that decision and stick to it. Honoring yourself, even if it's for a while, if you have to walk away for a while in order to come back more fulfilled and more whole, maybe it's what you need. Maybe that's what so many of us need in order to come back into authentic connection with the people that are meant to be in our lives. That's it for this video, my friends. I hope that it gave you a place to land or resonate with. And just want to remind you how strong you are and how brave you are and how committing to this journey is not easy and it's not for the masses. But if you've stuck it out, and I can tell that you have, it'll be fruitful if it hasn't been already. So be brave and commit to yourself and commit to this journey. It's worth it. I'll see you next time.